A black woman with top-level security clearance steps into an airport like any other day. She carries no banners, makes no noise, draws no attention, but what happens next isn't just coincidence. It's a system in motion. It's a quiet erasure. She is stopped, silenced, and digitally erased by the very structure she's entrusted to protect. 45 minutes later, the airline's $680 million federal contract is frozen without warning, and the AI that flagged her is no longer just a tool. It's now evidence. If you're watching this, stay with me. Because this isn't about a boarding pass. It's about a reckoning. Before we begin, comment below where in the world you're watching from. And if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or dismissed, this story is yours too. It all began in Terminal E. The fluorescent lights of the terminal glared with sterile precision, casting reflections that made everything seem sharper than it really was. Serena Holloway moved through them with practiced poise. Heels silent, carry-on unbranded, suit crisply cut but not boastful. She didn't need to announce who she was. Her presence was intentional. She was, in every sense, someone who understood how power works when it whispers instead of shouts. Behind her calm gaze lay weeks of classified briefings, a brutal 12-hour flight from Brussels, and one last contract to review. Her signature would determine the future of a multi-billion-dollar defense transport operation. But no one at the Orion Air Priority Check-in counter knew that. Or if they did, they had chosen to forget. She approached the desk with her boarding pass visible on her phone. First class. Direct to Washington, D.C. clearance level, platinum. There was no line, just a gentle hush. Yet for 2 long minutes, the staff didn't look up. 3 agents stood near the back, 2 women, 1 man, all dressed in Navy uniforms that matched the counters and their indifference. They spoke quietly, their heads tilted inward in a cluster that excluded her by design. One of them, a woman with platinum blonde hair coiled into a tight bun and brows arched so sharply they looked surprised at their own reflection, finally looked toward Serena. Their eyes met for less than half a second. The agent blinked, then turned back to her conversation, lips curling into a private joke Serena was not meant to hear. But she heard the laugh that followed. A white man in a trench coat walked in behind her. The same agent turned like she'd been summoned by sunlight. "Good morning, Mr. Clark," she beamed, voice like a marketing jingle. She took his phone, scanned it, offered him a warm towel and a glass of sparkling water from a tray that hadn't moved an inch for Serena. He nodded politely at Serena on his way past, eyes pausing just long enough to signal that he noticed, just enough to confirm that something didn't feel right. She was used to that look, that flicker of confusion, that mental footnote, she doesn't fit here. 10 minutes passed. Not a word was spoken to her. Not a glance. Not even a basic offer of assistance. In the silence, Serena stood like a statue carved out of tension and restraint. She had learned the power of silence in war zones. She had learned that patience was a weapon sharper than most people's anger. But this was not patience. This was measurement. When the intern approached her, he looked like a boy caught breaking a rule he didn't know existed. Barely 20. Cheeks pink with awkwardness. Voice trembling between politeness and discomfort. Excuse me, ma'am," he said, eyes flicking just above her shoulder. "You might be in the wrong check-in line. The general boarding queue is over." Serena didn't let him finish. She held out her phone and tilted the screen forward. First class. Government clearance. Priority status. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain. She let her silence press against him like heat. "Oh, okay, sorry, we just weren't expecting," he trailed off. She didn't help him fill in the blank. Didn't offer to ease his discomfort. She simply held his gaze until he flinched. Then, he gestured toward a row of plastic chairs near a vending machine across the lobby. "You can wait over there. We'll call you when we're ready." She walked slowly, deliberately, not to comply but to observe. As she passed the check-in desk, she caught the whisper, "Some people really don't get how this works." Laughter followed. Serena sat, back straight, legs crossed neatly at the ankle. The hard plastic of the chair didn't bother her. It wasn't the discomfort of the seat that she noted. It was the positioning. Facing the counter. Near the vending machine. Beneath a flickering light. Deliberate. She watched as 4 other passengers were processed smoothly. None of them looked like her. She tapped her phone. Opened an encrypted app. Didn't type. Just watched. Just listened. Waited. The assumption was that no one was watching. That no one important would care. They didn't know she was the final approver for their federal renewal. They didn't know she had been reviewing their biometric systems for 3 months. They didn't know she had the authority to greenlight or suspend their eligibility with a single entry into a secured terminal. And she wasn't angry. Not yet. She was gathering proof. 22 minutes after she arrived, a male agent leaned in and whispered something into the headset of the lead agent, the blonde with the polished smile and smudged humanity. Her grin faded for half a second. Then it snapped back into place. She scanned the room. Her eyes found Serena. "We're ready for the next," she said, as if nothing had happened. Serena stood. Her movements fluid but heavy with intent. She handed over her documents again. The screen blinked green. Her pass was printed. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence. She turned toward security. Heard the mutter. Bet she used someone else's clearance. She paused. Just for a breath. Then kept walking. The walk to the security lane was short, but in her mind, it unfolded in slow motion. The velvet ropes, the glass dividers, the mirrored walls, all of it sterile and curated to suggest exclusivity. It wasn't beauty. It was control. It was belonging monetized and policed. She stepped into the priority lane and scanned her pass. Green again. But before she could take a step forward, a man in a slate gray vest blocked her path. His name tag gleamed. His smile was practiced. His voice too smooth. "Miss Holloway," he said, pretending familiarity. "We're conducting a new biometric test for premium passengers. A facial recognition scan. Just a brief verification, optional of course, but you've been selected." Of course she had. She didn't speak. Just nodded. Followed. The corridor they led her through was lined with posters boasting innovation and inclusion. Words turned into wallpaper. Promises turned into props. They reached a white booth. A mounted scanner. A seat like a dentist's chair with no comfort. No purpose but obedience. "Look straight ahead," the agent said, gesturing like a maitre d' at a five-star dinner he hadn't paid for. She sat. Let the machine scan her face. Processing. The screen blinked. The man frowned. Covered the screen before she could read it. "All done," he chirped. "Just a sync delay. It'll resolve shortly." She stood. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said, opening the door. She said nothing. She walked back into the terminal, phone in hand, expression unreadable. Then she tapped the icon for VIP transport. Access denied. Then again on the government app. Profile authorization required. She didn't panic. She calculated. Because if this was an error, it wouldn't be this consistent. If this was oversight, it wouldn't be this precise. If this was personal, they had picked the wrong person. And the clock was already ticking. What they didn't realize was that Serena Holloway was not just a passenger. She was the system's mirror, and it had just tried to erase its own reflection. The terminal's architecture was designed to impress. Glass panels stretched skyward, reflecting light in calculated angles. Everything was intentional: brushed steel counters, polished marble floors, designer furniture in carefully spaced clusters. To the average traveler, it looked like efficiency. But to Serena Holloway, it was camouflage. Order, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a perfect cover for discrimination. She knew that. She had spent 2 decades auditing logistics systems for bias, tracing how power moved silently through networks disguised as convenience. And right now, she was watching it unfold in real time. On her. She stood at the edge of the private security lane, steps away from the main flow of passengers moving freely through boarding gates. Her phone remained locked, her access revoked, and her digital trail scrubbed. But none of that showed on her face. She walked slowly, not from hesitation, but from clarity. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured. She wasn't navigating a terminal anymore. She was navigating a system actively pretending she didn't exist. The velvet rope parted for her again. This time under the nervous gesture of a junior associate trying to compensate for a failure he didn't cause. He avoided eye contact as he stepped aside, mumbling, "I think we had a glitch earlier. Should be cleared now." He smiled weakly, but Serena didn't respond. She simply handed over her boarding pass, now printed on heavier stock paper with a small mark in the upper right corner. Barely visible, but definitely not standard. She noticed. They always left signs. The scanner blinked green once more. She moved toward the corridor marked Priority Government Access, a hallway lined with biometric sensors and soundproof panels meant to expedite and isolate high-level travelers. At the halfway point, she reached for her phone again. Standard procedure to summon a VIP ground vehicle that would escort her from the tarmac directly to her meeting point in D.C. The app refused to open. Access denied. She blinked once, calmly, and switched to the government's secure mobility platform. Authorization invalid. Clearance not verified. That made no sense. There were 3 levels of security clearance tied to her identity, each with separate redundancies. For all 3 to fail in tandem required either a coordinated internal override or a systemic breakdown. Neither should have been possible, unless someone inside the system had triggered it deliberately. A voice reached her from behind, hesitant and hushed. "Ma'am? Excuse me?" A young associate, barely out of college by the look of him, wearing an Orion ID badge and 2 big glasses, approached cautiously. "I think the system might have accidentally flagged your profile," he said, as if trying not to offend her by saying what he wasn't sure he understood. "Some of the new biometric scans trigger verification locks if the data doesn't sync right." Serena's voice was even, emotionless. "And what does that mean for transportation?" He looked around nervously. "Well, technically, you'd have to call a cab manually. The internal VIP ride service won't dispatch without full profile clearance. And, the override for something like that is above my pay grade." He offered a helpless shrug. "Sorry." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked past the concierge desk to the nearest public kiosk. It was outdated, a relic of a system built before everything moved to mobile. She entered her name, scanned her ID, and waited. Red box. Account temporarily suspended. For assistance, contact support. She didn't contact support. She stepped away from the kiosk, retrieved her encrypted device from the side compartment of her bag, and began running a passive trace on her own digital footprint. The result was as precise as it was troubling. Her profile, which should have been labeled DoD Platinum Executive Access, was now marked pending biometric match. Worse, the status change had been logged without triggering an audit notification. That meant someone had overridden the fail-safes. That meant someone had done this quietly. Around her, people moved in synchronized flows, gliding from gate to gate, sipping drinks, making calls, and walking past without noticing that a woman had just been erased from the network while still standing in the middle of it. That was the design, smooth systems that masked the violence of exclusion with user-friendly aesthetics. She moved toward the executive business lounge. Not to rest, to work. Inside, the lighting dimmed to a softer hue, and ambient music hummed like the backdrop of a tech commercial. A smiling host in a tailored vest greeted her with programmed charm. "Welcome, may I scan your boarding pass for access?" She handed over the pass. The scanner blinked, then froze, then displayed a message in neutral blue text, verification hold. Profile under review. The host's smile faltered, barely perceptible. "Oh, one moment, let me check something." He turned to his screen, typing rapidly. Serena watched the reflection of the interface in the glass behind him. Her name appeared, then disappeared. He looked up. "It seems the system's reclassifying your access temporarily. Happens sometimes during updates. Should resolve shortly." "Temporarily," she repeated, voice calm. "Yes," he said, "but you may not be eligible for lounge services until it's resolved." "Nothing personal, it's just automation." That phrase again. Nothing personal. The perfect mask for impersonal cruelty. She stepped aside, walked through the terminal, found a quieter section by the frosted glass panels near the north exit, and sat alone. She wasn't done. She was gathering. From her encrypted device, she rerouted a low-bandwidth satellite signal and connected to the Department of Defense procurement platform. She had 5 minutes before her scheduled pre-briefing call. The system rejected her initial login. She tried again using a security token. Rejected. Third attempt. Rejected with a red flag attached. A moment later, a public monitor across the lounge flashed a message in sterile corporate tone. "Our system has detected an access inconsistency. If you are not aligned with current lounge selection criteria, we kindly ask you to vacate the space." The message didn't name her. It didn't have to. She stood, walked toward the help desk again. "There's a message requesting that I leave," she said plainly. The man behind the counter flinched. "I'm sure it wasn't directed at you," he offered quickly. "Probably just a general notification. These systems get buggy sometimes." "I need to verify my account," she said. He tapped his console, frowned. "Your account was created 11 days ago," he said. "It shows no travel history." Serena blinked. "That's incorrect. I've flown Orion 18 times in 2 years. Booked through federal priority tier. I've used my status to enter this very lounge 3 times this year." He nodded, uncomfortable. It's just not in the system. Maybe your data was purged during the last migration? We switched data vendors recently. The AI reclassified some older profiles as dormant if they didn't meet certain activity thresholds. So my record was the only one erased, she asked. I'm not saying that, he stammered. Just saying we don't have it. Not anymore. She opened her tablet, pulled up screenshots of her full booking history. Receipts. Lounge entries. TSA pre-check confirmations. Handed them over. He scanned the QR code. Error. Not found. Another. Not found. He paused. The AI might have misflagged it as anomalous usage. Serena's expression didn't change. She already knew. The system hadn't glitched. It had decided. It had scrubbed her from its structure. Not because she was suspicious, but because she didn't match the pattern it was built to serve. Her silence, her attire, her lack of digital trail outside government networks, it made her invisible. And then disposable. She stood up, walked back to the frosted glass. Sat quietly again, watching as the digital gate behind her pulsed with filtered passengers. Passengers the system welcomed. The system was still smiling at them. Still serving. But it had turned its back on her. She didn't panic. She documented. Every rejection. Every blocked screen. Every automated message laced with civility and wrapped in exclusion. Because silence may have erased her from the system. But silence was also her weapon. And she was just getting started. By the time Serena Holloway reached the next checkpoint, her presence had become a quiet anomaly. Not loud enough to cause alarm. Not suspicious in the way that would warrant headlines. But unmistakably other. Not due to who she was, but because the system had made a decision about what she was allowed to be. And that decision wasn't based on truth. It was based on comfort, predictability, pattern. And she no longer fit the pattern. The walk to the security re-entry lane was short, but the distance felt longer than anything she had crossed in recent memory. It wasn't the number of steps, it was the atmosphere. The shift. Her badge still hung at her hip, obscured beneath her coat. Her name still glowed green in the encrypted systems of the Department of Defense. But here in this space, framed by LED panels, velvet ropes, and artificial smiles, none of it mattered. Not anymore. She stepped into the biometric lane again. The scanner blinked green, hesitated, then switched to amber. A low chime, meant to sound polite, indicated that her status was in progress. That term, like so many others in these environments, was designed to buy time without answering any questions. A man in a polished gray vest appeared as if summoned by the delay. He approached with the calm, practiced gait of someone trained not to escalate, just to contain. "Ms. Holloway?" he asked, voice smooth, expression unreadable. "Yes. We're performing additional verification today for high-clearance travelers. It's part of our ongoing system upgrades. If you wouldn't mind stepping aside for a moment, we'll get everything processed quickly." Serena didn't flinch. She followed. Not because she trusted him, but because she needed to see how deep this rabbit hole went. The hallway they entered wasn't labeled. A glass corridor turned sterile white at the halfway point, its walls lined with posters declaring phrases like "security through innovation" and "advanced trust begins here." Each one felt like satire now. Empty affirmations decorating a space designed to isolate. At the end of the hallway sat a compact, unmarked room. The door opened automatically as they approached, revealing a chair, a scanner, and a control panel. There were no windows. Just soft lighting that buzzed at a frequency only noticed when you're waiting too long. "If you'll just sit here, we'll complete the verification," the agent said, gesturing toward the chair. "It's fast and completely non-invasive." Serena took her seat without comment. She aligned her gaze with the scanner. The machine hummed, the lens adjusted, and a blue light passed across her face. "Scan complete." "Processing." The man tapped at his tablet, paused, then tilted the screen slightly away from her view. "There's a brief sync delay," he said again. Same excuse. Same smile. She rose to her feet before he could finish the sentence. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said with a strained tone, clearly eager to get her out of the booth. But Serena didn't walk away immediately. She scanned the room, the walls, the cables. She noted the brand of the scanner, a private subcontractor used by government agencies only under strict compliance. Yet this one was hooked into Orion Air's own internal verification loop, something that shouldn't be possible unless there had been a deliberate integration. Outside the booth, the terminal buzzed on. People moved in smooth lines. Digital interfaces blinked softly with curated optimism, flight updates, travel tips, lounge promotions. The world went on, untouched by what was happening to her in silence. She pulled out her phone again. Opened the VIP transport app. Still locked. She tapped the secure federal mobility channel. Still locked. She refreshed her login token. Access denied. A moment later, another Orion associate approached. Younger. Glasses. Orion issued tablet clutched in nervous hands. Hi ma'am. I think your profile was flagged. Accidentally. It happens sometimes when the biometric data isn't cleanly integrated. Probably nothing. Probably. Serena's voice was steady. And that affects what, exactly? The man hesitated. Well, it limits access to some services, transportation, internal lounges, certain clearance channels. But once the system resyncs. And when does that happen? He glanced at his tablet again. It's automated. I'm not sure. She didn't respond. Just stared at him long enough for his composure to crack. He turned and walked away. She moved back toward the terminal's central hub and located the Executive Tech Center, a small room designated for high-clearance travelers needing to conduct secure calls, review documentation, or access encrypted files mid-transit. It was tucked discreetly behind frosted glass near the high-end duty-free section. She tapped her badge at the entry point. The light turned green. She stepped inside. The room was silent, temperature-controlled, and sparsely furnished. A desk, a mounted screen, a secure terminal bolted into the wall, with a biometric pad beneath the monitor. Serena activated the system, entered her credentials. Login in progress. Then the screen froze. Then flashed red. Access denied. Profile under review. Her heart didn't race. She had trained past that. She simply removed her token and walked to the side console, a touch-enabled kiosk used to initiate IT support tickets. She entered her ID. A new message appeared. Your account has been reported. Please exit the system and await further instruction. Reported. Not locked. Not suspended. Reported. She didn't exit. She accessed her secure device and launched a trace. The result was chilling. Someone from Orion's internal systems had manually flagged her profile. Not just for reclassification, but for passive surveillance. The flag was disguised as an automated filter, meaning that anyone trying to override it would think it was a system glitch rather than an act of design. She looked around the room. It hadn't changed. But she had. She inserted her drive into the secure machine and prepared to access the Department of Defense's Joint Operations module via offline mode. As the booth initialized, the ambient lighting dimmed unexpectedly. The screen froze. The help button on the desk panel stopped responding. She pressed the door release. Nothing. Locked. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Finally a knock. A technician appeared behind the glass, tablet in hand. He waved, "I'm typing something," then tapped into the system. It looks like the booth was locked from terminal control, he said through the intercom. There's a mismatch in access tags. Standard protocol is to lock the unit until override approval. Serena held up her badge to the glass. He scanned it. His eyes widened slightly as the clearance level loaded. A beat of silence passed between them. Okay, he mumbled, flustered. This must be a system error. I'm overriding now. The door released. She stepped out slowly. I'll need a copy of the flag report, she said. He blinked. I don't think we usually, then escalate it to someone who does, she said. He nodded, nervously murmuring into his headset. As Serena walked past, she caught a glimpse of his screen. Subject flagged for irregular usage pattern. Suggested surveillance status, passive observation. She kept walking. She moved through the terminal not like a traveler, but like a fault line. Silent. Inevitable. Staff members whispered. Some turned away. Others stared and didn't know why. The system had spoken. It had labeled her. But it had forgotten who she was, and what she was capable of. They hadn't broken her. They'd triggered her protocol. The next move wouldn't be loud. It would be decisive. Because Serena Holloway hadn't come to this airport just to fly. She had come to deliver judgment. She made her way back toward the central terminal like a phantom moving through polished glass and curated stillness. If you had looked at her from afar, nothing about Serena Holloway would seem out of place. Her clothes were elegant but practical, her gait unhurried, her expression unreadable. But underneath the surface of her calm exterior, the temperature had shifted. Not just inside her, but inside the system. The next 15 minutes would confirm everything she had suspected, and then push her further into a place not even her years of defense-level exposure had prepared her for, being systematically deleted, not through force, but through something far more efficient, algorithmic erasure. She approached the lounge again, not the executive work booth this time, but the general concierge area nestled between two retail installations and a silent espresso bar. On the screen above the counter, her flight still showed on time. Everything looked normal, and that was the most terrifying part, how normal the performance of injustice could be. She stepped up to the help desk. A red-headed woman in a powder blue blazer greeted her with a flawless corporate smile. The badge on her chest read Tiffany Guest Experience Supervisor. "Hi there, how can I help you today?" Serena didn't respond with pleasantries. She pulled up an encrypted thread on her phone, rotated the screen, and held it out for Tiffany to read. It was a confirmation email. Verified. Digital signature embedded. Cleared through the Department of Defense's secure travel coordination platform. It stated plainly, "Booking confirmed for Serena Holloway, first class, seat 4A, access level clearance, VIP lounge room 2A, 9 a.m., Terminal E." Tiffany scanned the message. Her smile didn't fade, but Serena noticed the shift behind her eyes, the fraction of a second it took for polite hospitality to register an internal directive. Tiffany straightened subtly. "Ah," she said with a performative chuckle. "So this is an email confirmation from an external source." Serena's voice was low but clear. "It's from the Department of Defense." "Yes, I see that," Tiffany replied. "Unfortunately, our policy prevents us from validating documents from unverifiable domains. Especially .gov emails. We've had phishing attempts in the past." Serena didn't blink. "You're refusing to acknowledge documentation issued by the United Defense Infrastructure Service?" Tiffany's tone stayed neutral. "It's not personal. It's just protocol. If you can provide a secondary verification from inside our internal system, we'd be happy to assist. Your booking system receives encrypted clearance from the Joint Logistics Authority. You either see it in your system or someone is filtering it." The mask of customer service wavered. Tiffany's fingers danced over the keyboard with a little more urgency now, but just as she opened her mouth to respond, her screen pinged with a small alert. She glanced at it, then past Serena's shoulder. "One moment," she said, stepping away. Less than a minute later, a tall man in a slim black suit emerged from the hallway behind the counter. He wore no visible badge, but the earpiece and tablet gave him away as internal security. High enough rank to hide behind anonymity, low enough to be sent to deliver quiet warnings. He stopped a few feet from Serena and tapped through a sequence of menus on his screen. His eyes narrowed as he paused on her profile. "Ms. Holloway," he said, like he was reading her name for the first time even though he'd been briefed minutes earlier. "You've been flagged for a system review. It's likely nothing. There's just been an anomaly in the access logs connected to your account." Serena said nothing. "In the meantime, we've restricted lounge access until verification is complete." "Verification of what?" she asked. "Credential legitimacy," he replied, then added almost too quickly, "We've had reports of spoofed travel identities tied to government credentials. So we're taking extra care today. I'm sure you understand." No, she didn't. And she wasn't meant to. She didn't respond. Instead, she pulled up her booking again. This time she displayed the verification code, the .mil domain authorization, the active seal from the DoD Procurement Board. He didn't even look. "We'll need to escalate this to our compliance team," he said. "Please wait in the general seating area until we get the all clear." She turned and walked away without speaking. But just before passing through the security glass corridor, she noticed something. A screen mounted just inside the operations hallway was glowing with an internal announcement. Plain black background, red borders, bold white text. Security Alert Level 2 Subject, Holloway Serena. Potential breach of protocol. Passenger may be impersonating a government credential holder. Her picture sat beneath the text. A black and white image, time-stamped 10 minutes ago. She was looking straight ahead, standing calmly at the lounge entrance. Framed in red. A staff member noticed her gaze and stepped forward, shifting the screen slightly like a child caught playing with a forbidden toy. "We just received this," he mumbled. "It came from Central." Serena nodded once. No emotion. No question. She didn't need to ask. The system wasn't glitching. It was executing. She returned to the main terminal, moving like a pressure change, subtle but unavoidable. At every counter, every lounge entry, the same pattern emerged. Scans froze, assistants hesitated, access denied. Her identity was intact, her presence real. But the system had marked her, and now it was behaving accordingly. She approached the membership services desk, the last line of human interaction for elite travelers. The desk was encased in thick glass and surrounded by calming screens designed to create a sense of confidence. It was here where itinerary errors were solved, loyalty records retrieved, and exceptions made for valued members. She stepped forward. A young man, dressed in the signature Navy Orion vest, greeted her with overcompensating enthusiasm. "Good morning. How can I assist you today?" "I want to verify my loyalty account under the name Serena Holloway," she said. "Full travel record. Last 24 months. He nodded cheerfully and began typing. But the moment his fingers stopped, his smile faltered. He tapped again, brows furrowed. He glanced up. "That's strange." Serena didn't speak. He cleared his throat. "It's showing that your account was created 11 days ago. There's one pending flight. No prior history." She let a beat pass before speaking. "That's incorrect. I've flown Orion 18 times in the last 2 years. Government priority tier. I've booked with the executive concierge multiple times. My TSA pre-check and DoD alignment are on record." He looked increasingly pale. I'm not saying that's not true. Just that we don't see anything here. Maybe the system purged some legacy records during the last data transition." She stared at him. "And in that purge, my record was the only one erased." He opened his mouth to deflect, but stopped when she raised her tablet and rotated the screen. Dozens of records. Receipts. Bookings. Boarding passes. He scanned the first. Error, not found. Second. Mismatch. Third. System rejected. He swallowed hard. Sometimes the AI tags non-standard profiles for reassessment, especially if they show unusual patterns or atypical metadata. She leaned forward. "Define atypical." He didn't answer. Her phone buzzed with a notification. She tapped it open. A message from the Orion app. Neutral tone. Gray background. "Your profile has been flagged for atypical usage patterns. You may experience limited access to member-exclusive offers, surveys, and promotions." That was it. No context. No appeal. No clarity. She took a screenshot, then tried to edit her settings. Everything was grayed out. Seat preference, meal requirements, TSA alignment, even her profile photo gone. Replaced by a blank gray silhouette. She rotated the phone again and showed the staffer. "This isn't a system update," she said quietly. "This is a decision." He looked around, clearly rattled. "I can try contacting back-end support, but sometimes when the system flags a profile, it restricts override access even for internal teams. So they're locked out of fixing what the system breaks." He hesitated. "Sometimes." "Yeah." Serena turned and walked away. No more words. Not because she had given up, but because the silence had told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't personal, and that's what made it so dangerous. Serena Holloway stepped away from the desk with the calm of someone who had spent decades mastering the art of being underestimated. She didn't walk fast. She didn't raise her voice. That wasn't how power moved when it knew exactly what it was doing. She simply adjusted the lapel of her jacket, thumbed the edge of her encrypted device inside her coat, and began calculating. The erasure was nearly complete. Not loud, not dramatic, just effective. And that was the point. This wasn't designed to stop her at a door. It was designed to convince her she had no door to open in the first place. But there was one flaw in the entire algorithmic illusion. Serena wasn't just a passenger. She was the system's auditor. She didn't carry her authority in tone or posture. It lived in her fingertips, in her clearance token, in the lines of code she had once signed off on when she was overseeing contract compliance at the Defense Mobility Directorate. And now, the same digital fortress she had helped design had decided she didn't belong inside it. That was a mistake. She moved back toward the operations corridor with unshaken grace. The security agent stationed at the side didn't attempt to intercept her this time. In fact, he barely looked up. By then, her name had already been whispered through half a dozen channels. Some people knew who she was now, but it was too late to undo what had been set in motion. She reached the frosted glass entryway at the far end of the terminal, the one that marked access to the operations liaison room for Tier 2 personnel. It was rarely used, its code-protected door tucked between the IT control hallway and a closed maintenance annex. Serena tapped the panel. The door hissed open. Inside was nothing extravagant, just a steel desk. a wall-mounted screen, and a secure military-grade laptop fixed into the corner like a relic. She recognized the model instantly. She'd approved its deployment to 10 government nodes earlier that year. It was built not for luxury but for precision. She sat, unclipped her encrypted security token from the inner seam of her coat, slid it into the port. The machine came to life with a soft hum. No errors. No hesitation. Welcome Holloway S. Tier 1 Evaluator Access Verified. The screen shifted to a secure operations interface. 6 modules appeared. She selected the one labeled Vendor Evaluation Oversight and entered her two-factor authorization. The system pinged once, then opened a dashboard labeled Orion Air Contract 23A, Active Evaluation. She didn't hesitate. In the command field, she typed, freeze_view Orion 23A, then pressed enter. Processing. The system blinked twice. Contract evaluation status, suspended vendor access, locked pending audit notification. Issued TO procurement channels. She closed the screen, removed the token, and locked it back into its magnetized case. Her expression never shifted. Her breathing never faltered. But everything had changed. Across the terminal, in rooms she would never walk into, alerts were already firing. Inside Orion's private Slack network, a channel reserved for its defense contracts team lit up with a red flag. Urgent. Contract ID Orion 23A has been frozen by Tier 1 Evaluator. Review suspended. National procurement alert triggered. Less than 15 seconds later, a second message arrived. Flag priority, Evaluator is on site. Credentials suppressed without justification. Escalation advised immediately. It included a still frame from a time-stamped security camera. Serena's image. The same one that had been marked earlier with potential impersonator. But now it bore a different caption. Verified credential match level 5 DoD executive 3 floors above the main concourse. Orion's executive suite had descended into confusion. CEO Marshall Quinn stood in front of a digital display wall, watching the contract dashboard flicker into red. Around him, department heads murmured panicked half-theories. The marketing lead stammered about public optics. The compliance director demanded a paper trail. But all noise died the moment Quinn's desk phone rang. Not his office line. His direct, encrypted one. He answered on the first ring. This is Quinn. A pause. The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate. Mr. Quinn, this is Eleanor Reyes, Senior Strategic Assistant to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. His spine straightened. We are formally notifying you, she continued, that your company has been found to have denied access, both physical and digital, to a credentialed Department of Defense representative, currently listed as one of only 3 individuals in the country authorized to approve strategic mobility contracts under the Defense Mobility Act. Quinn tried to interject. She didn't stop. You didn't just inconvenience a high-clearance passenger, Mr. Quinn. You interfered with a national defense protocol in progress. He opened his mouth again. She cut him off. As of this moment, all active and pending defense contracts under your vendor ID have been frozen. A written statement from the Undersecretary will follow. Consider this your formal notification. And then she hung up. Silence descended on the executive command room. The air was thick with it. No one moved. Quinn's hand still hovered above the phone, like he could reverse time by not letting go. Downstairs, the terminal buzzed on, oblivious to the rupture. Passengers bought coffees, searched for gates, strolled past windows. But inside the infrastructure of Orion, something far deeper had fractured. Emails began to surface. One, sent to the entire risk and audit team, included the subject line, internal tag audit urgent source, Holloway, Serena, and then the crack widened. An intern from marketing, unaware of what had happened, forwarded an old promotional PDF to an internal Slack channel. It was a campaign image from Orion's Women in Aviation Leadership initiative. Centered in the frame was Serena Holloway, her military portrait clean and commanding. The caption beneath it read, "Her courage defines our future. Lead from the front." The irony struck like a lightning bolt. The same woman the system had flagged as a threat, as a ghost, as a question mark in human form, was the very face of the company's diversity campaign a year earlier. The leak was inevitable. Within minutes, screenshots of the internal image, alongside the access denial messages, hit private industry forums. A former engineer posted a thread detailing her own warnings about the algorithm's growing bias. She included excerpts from internal memos, redacted but damning, highlighting how AI systems were being trained on limited data excluding non-standard behavior under the guise of optimization. The post went viral in under 40 minutes. By then, Serena had already left the operations room. She walked back into the terminal's flow of bodies like a recalibrated fault line. Staff noticed. Some whispered. Others turned to avoid her. No one tried to stop her now. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Her job was done. The contract had been frozen. The oversight had been triggered. The system that tried to erase her had accidentally flagged the one person capable of holding it accountable. That wasn't just irony. That was precision. And she had delivered it in silence. The dominoes didn't fall all at once, but they fell fast. Within the first hour after Serena Holloway executed the freeze command on Orion's federal defense contract, ripples began to turn into waves, and the quiet hum of operational systems transformed into a storm of digital sirens and cascading audits. But the public remained unaware. The terminal still buzzed with the illusion of order. Passengers sipped lattes. Announcements chimed cheerfully. The display boards kept flipping on time. But inside the back-end channels of Orion Air, inside the firewalls meant to separate mistakes from scrutiny, the storm was no longer containable. Upstairs, in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the concourse, Marshal Quinn stood stiffly at the head of a gleaming chrome table. His executive team flanked him in silence, their expressions etched with panic masquerading as professionalism. Everyone had questions, but the answers were arriving faster than they could process. The digital dashboard mounted on the far wall glowed red, status. Contract Orion 23A suspended reason. Unlawful suppression of credentialed DoD evaluator, who authorized the profile flag. Quinn demanded, his voice sharp and urgent. I want a name. Not a team. A name. His chief technology officer, Leonard Farrow, adjusted his collar and cleared his throat. It appears the system initiated a soft suppression protocol based on real-time input, anomalies. Quinn stared at him. What does that mean in English, Leonard? It means, Leonard replied cautiously, the AI flagged Ms. Holloway's profile based on atypical behavior markers, visual conformity, metadata mismatch, lack of cross-platform presence. You mean she didn't wear a branded watch or post airport selfies? The chief compliance officer interjected, sarcasm thinly veiled under dread. Leonard avoided eye contact. The system wasn't supposed to make those decisions autonomously, he added. It was supposed to assist, not determine. And yet, Quinn said coldly, it determined. Just then, an alert pinged across the room. A forwarded message from the legal department. It contained a PDF, clipped from internal archives. A file everyone in the room had seen before, but now looked at with fresh horror. It was Serena's original personnel profile, compiled 2 years earlier when Orion had featured her as a nominee for the Women of Strategic Flight initiative. Page 1. A portrait of Serena Holloway in full military uniform. Calm. Steady. Respected. Page 2. Nominee for National Service Medal Operation Guardian Wing distinguished for manual recovery of Hercules C-130 under fire during Kabul extraction, saving 12 U.S. and Allied lives. Final line. She is the future we should be building for. The silence in the room became heavier than the air itself. She was your campaign, the HR director said, almost in disbelief. She was our campaign. Quinn sat down without realizing he had moved. Then came the internal chat leak. An intern, young, angry, and disillusioned, screenshot the flagged camera image of Serena at the lounge entrance, time-stamped with the potential impersonator alert, and placed it side by side with the campaign photo. Then posted it anonymously to a private aviation workforce forum. Caption: From inspiration to anomaly. In 2 years flat. Algorithm approved. It went viral within an hour. And then the press began to circle. A reporter at Aerotech Weekly picked up the story. Within 45 minutes, the headline hit. Orion AI flags its own hero as a threat. $680 million contract frozen after DoD interference allegation. But the worst hadn't hit yet. The most devastating blow came not from the outside, but from within. At 2:46 p.m., a joint audit team from the Department of Defense and the Government Accountability Office launched a mirrored trace of Orion's AI compliance systems. What they found made explanations impossible. The suppression wasn't a glitch. It was behavior learned. Inside the machine learning logs, buried between optimization protocols and predictive modeling layers, was a string of coded decision trees. Serena's profile, devoid of certain digital comfort cues, had tripped a cascading exclusion score. The algorithm assessed her based on a weighted matrix. No frequent flyer loyalty badges on display, no corporate affiliated calendar syncs handbag brand. Unidentifiable attire, non-corporate formal score, minus 0.72 verbal pattern. Low conversational interaction biometric pattern. Low confidence match for typical Tier 1 traveler archetype translated. She was flagged for walking quietly, dressing without labels, not chattering into Bluetooth headsets, and failing to align with the data set of expected executive behavior. It wasn't conscious bias. It was automated inheritance. The AI had simply learned what humans rewarded and penalized, and encoded it without guilt. Leonard Farrow received a message on his tablet while still in the executive meeting. Subject line: suspension of operational authority effective immediately. He read it 3 times before speaking. I've been removed from platform oversight, he said quietly. No one responded. A second message followed. From federal oversight this time. All machine learning models currently active across Orion's passenger systems to undergo immediate forensic audit. Public statement pending. By the end of the business day, more than $900 million in projected Q3 stock value had been wiped off Orion's market cap. Internal chat groups scrambled to spin the narrative, but no one dared post a public apology. Legal teams were still trying to define whether this was negligence, discrimination, or digital sabotage. Meanwhile, down on the concourse, Serena Holloway stood by the panoramic windows at Gate B27. Her face was not on screens. Her voice was not in interviews. But her silence was everywhere. Across lounges and check-in counters, employees whispered her name. Some recognized her from orientation videos. Others remembered her from marketing posters still displayed in Terminal B. She made no eye contact. She asked for no justice. Because justice, she understood, wasn't asked for. It was demanded by presence. She received one final notification, this time not from the Orion app, but from the Department of Defense internal message system. Action acknowledged. Contract suspended. Compliance under review. Response strategy initiated. And beneath it, a line not often included in procedural communication. You were seen. We're with you. Serena read it once, locked her device, and looked ahead at the gate. Passengers continued boarding. A young couple laughed over something in their phones. A child pressed his face against the glass, fascinated by the fuel truck outside. Life, as always, went on. But something fundamental had changed. The system had spoken, and then it had stuttered. And now, for the first time in years, it was being forced to listen. Serena Holloway didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply breathed. And in that breath was every injustice that had slipped through algorithms, every profile filtered for wearing the wrong jacket, speaking with the wrong rhythm, holding authority too quietly. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about what happens when the system forgets who built it, and that builder comes back with a receipt. The hearing chamber was colder than it looked. Polished mahogany desks lined the floor in a semicircle that resembled a courtroom more than a place of progress. The seal of the United States Congress loomed overhead, golden, silent, unblinking. Beneath it sat 7 lawmakers, flanked by 2 data ethics specialists, 1 Department of Transportation official, and an ocean of tension. Serena Holloway's name wasn't on the schedule, but her shadow filled the room. A single large monitor faced the panel. It displayed a paused frame from the Orion terminal, a time-stamped security feed showing a black woman in a dark suit standing calmly at the edge of the first-class lounge. Her image was black and white, but it didn't need color to communicate weight. It was Serena. And below her image, the original internal alert caption still glowed, now in stark red. Subject: Holloway, Serena potential impersonator security alert level 2. That image had made its rounds through government inboxes, internal contractor networks, even civil rights committees, until it landed here, on the docket of a congressional hearing titled, Bias in the Machine. Can Technology Learn Prejudice? The chairman, a senator from Illinois known for his quiet disposition and sharp memory, cleared his throat and tapped the gavel once. The room shifted its posture. Screens were lit. Pens hovered above notepads. The session had begun. Let the record reflect, he started, that we are convening this hearing to investigate recent reports of algorithmic discrimination and its impact on federally governed transportation systems. We will begin by reviewing a short clip provided by the Department of Defense in connection with an investigation into Orion Air's compliance protocols. The monitor played. Silent. Slow. Frame 1. Serena's boarding pass scanning green. Frame 2, her access being denied. Frame 3, a staff member whispering into a headset. Frame 4, Serena being redirected, her expression unchanging. Frame 5, the screen at the help desk pulsing with the profile under review notice. Frame 6, Serena locked inside a supposedly neutral tech booth. Frame 7, a frozen image of her face on a grainy feed. Frame 8, the internal AI interface marking her as an anomaly. Frame 9, a staffer showing her the monitor ashamed. Frame 10, the red alert. When the video ended, the silence was deeper than before. Congresswoman Adele Marquez, known for her intolerance of vagueness and her background in civil liberties litigation, leaned forward. She spoke with the kind of voice that made people wish they had rehearsed their lies better. "Mr. Quinn," she said, her eyes fixed on the CEO of Orion Air seated at the center table, "do you recognize the individual shown in that footage?" Marshal Quinn, red-eyed and tightly wound in his tailored Navy suit, nodded once. "Yes, Congresswoman. That is Ms. Serena Holloway. And do you recognize her position?" "She is, or was," he paused. "She is a senior evaluator for the Department of Defense. Tier 1 clearance. Was your company aware of her role at the time of the incident?" "No, ma'am." "Should it have been?" A pause. "Yes." Marquez didn't blink. "And did your system, designed to streamline and secure passenger experience, correctly identify her?" Quinn's throat moved, but his voice came slowly. "No, ma'am. It did not." "Did it deny her access?" "Yes." "Did it freeze her travel profile, erase her loyalty history, lock her digital permissions, and publicly tag her as a threat?" "Yes." "Based on what?" Quinn swallowed again. "Our behavioral conformity algorithm, trained on existing passenger patterns, flagged her as an anomaly due to a combination of profile silence, nonverbal engagement traits, travel attire, and a lack of cross-platform behavior alignment." Marquez cocked her head. Translation: she didn't wear a smartwatch, didn't chat into a Bluetooth, didn't post her travel on Instagram, and dressed in a way your system didn't associate with power. Correct? Quinn's voice barely cleared a whisper. Yes. The monitor shifted. Now it displayed another still image. Serena again. But this time, from an Orion diversity campaign, a high-resolution portrait where she stood at the edge of an aircraft hangar, wind catching the edge of her coat. Across the image, the tagline, "Lead from the front." Marquez let it hang in the air for a moment. "This," she said, "was your branding campaign. She was your model of excellence. She represented what you claimed your company aspired to. And yet the very system you used to determine worth erased her not because of who she was, but because of who she didn't remind you of." A beat passed. Marquez turned toward the panel of experts behind her. "Myra Lynn," she said, addressing the data scientist who had once worked on Orion's AI development before resigning over ethical concerns, "can you help the committee understand what went wrong?" Myra spoke softly, but her words cut deeper than any accusation. "When you feed systems a biased history," she said, "they learn to repeat it. AI doesn't invent discrimination. It inherits it. It refines it. It masks it in logic and labels it optimization. It makes racism look like math." There was a rustle of unease in the audience. Several heads nodded. Others scribbled notes. But no one interrupted. Marquez leaned back. This system then wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as it was designed to. Just for the wrong values. "Yes," Myra replied. "It worked perfectly at filtering out what it didn't understand." And what it didn't understand, Marquez concluded, was quiet authority. The panel fell silent again. Another slide appeared on the screen. This time, it displayed a decision tree, lines of code outlining how the AI flagged a profile. It assigned negative values to undefined accessories, absence of third-party calendar integration, and most notably, a line that read, "Probability index, executive equals low, based on dress conformity, verbal engagement, biometric baseline, confidence mismatch." Marquez spoke again, this time slower. "Your system learned to distrust people who don't perform wealth, who don't mirror the digital behaviors of corporate archetypes, who travel in silence, who carry power without announcing it, and in doing so, it learned to erase them." She looked around the room. Not at Quinn, not at the experts, but at the staffers, the aides, the reporters, the interns in the back row. Think about how many people were filtered like this. Think about the people who didn't have a token, who didn't have the authority to freeze a contract, who were quietly pushed out of systems that no longer knew how to recognize them. Her voice dropped slightly. And then ask yourselves, how many of you have been walking through those systems? Quietly flagged, quietly dismissed, and never even knew. A silence thicker than before followed. The chairman finally cleared his throat and addressed the room. This committee recommends immediate oversight reform into algorithmic screening protocols across all federal transportation vendors. We will require transparency in training datasets, periodic audits of machine learning behavior, and a human override mechanism in all passenger filtering systems. He paused, looking directly into the camera that was live streaming the hearing. This is not just about code. This is about accountability. When systems make decisions, systems built by us, they reflect not our machines, but our morality. The session adjourned. But the reckoning had only just begun. Outside the hearing, news trucks waited. Think pieces drafted themselves in real time. Civil rights groups scheduled press conferences. Airline lobbies initiated quiet purges of their AI vendors. And across a dozen terminals nationwide, passengers now watched themselves being scanned, not with suspicion of their own actions, but with suspicion of the system doing the scanning. And Serena? She wasn't in the hearing room. She didn't need to be. She had already spoken the only way power truly listens, by making it hurt where it counts. She had held up a mirror to the machine, and the machine had blinked. Weeks passed. The noise subsided, but the echoes lingered. The story of Serena Holloway, the executive erased by the system she once helped build, had become a quiet anthem, murmured beneath boardroom meetings, whispered across data labs, dissected in college classrooms and late-night news panels. But Serena herself didn't speak. She gave no interviews. She wrote no op-eds. She did not tweet, post, or perform. She didn't need to. Her silence was still louder than their apologies. In the aftermath, the Department of Defense issued formal directives mandating third-party audits of all algorithmic passenger profiling systems used in federal transportation partnerships. The term passive suppression entered the national lexicon. Tech CEOs scrambled to rebrand bias as teachable errors. Consulting firms peddled AI ethics as a premium service. But Serena watched from the outside, detached, calm, observing the machine bend beneath a pressure it had never expected. And then one morning, she returned to the airport, not out of necessity, but intention. She booked a flight through a smaller carrier, one not yet entangled in federal contract webs. The airline had no biometric gates, no AI-powered lounges, just people. Imperfect, slow-moving, occasionally apologetic, but people nonetheless. And that, today, was the point. She arrived dressed in the same quiet dignity as before, low heels, tailored coat, carry-on in hand. Her face still bore the same expression, unreadable, yet deeply present. Her steps echoed softly against the wax tile as she crossed the threshold of Terminal C. The security line was moderate. Nothing extraordinary. An older couple argued gently in front of her about which one had forgotten the charger. A teenage boy behind her bobbed his head to music that no one else could hear. The air was filled with the usual travel tension, annoyance, anticipation, caffeine. No one recognized her. No whispers, no camera flashes, no hollow apologies disguised as acknowledgments. And still, everything had changed. She passed through security. No delay, no override, no random selection. Her boarding pass scanned with a simple green flash. No extra scrutiny, no second glance. Yet, she remained alert, not out of paranoia but precision. The system had learned. But she had not forgotten. She walked toward the gate. As she approached, a young employee stepped out from behind the kiosk. Early 20s, hair pulled into a neat braid, Orion blue eyes that revealed nerves behind kindness. Her badge was newly laminated, her blazer too crisp, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "Ms. Holloway?" Serena turned slightly, the name a soft bell she no longer flinched at hearing. The girl took a small step closer. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I used to work at Orion," she said. "Left right after everything." She looked down, embarrassed. "I didn't think someone like me could stay. I thought it wasn't built for us." Serena said nothing. "But now," the girl continued, eyes rising, steadier this time, "I came back. Different airline. Different system. But I came back. Because now I know, we can change it from inside." There was a pause, suspended like a held breath. Then the girl said, more quietly than before, "You didn't just freeze a contract. You unfroze a future." Serena looked at her for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. Not sentimental, not ceremonial, just true. Don't come back to be allowed, she said quietly. Come back to make sure the system has to. The young woman swallowed, nodded, then stepped aside, allowing Serena to proceed. The boarding chime sounded. Rows were called. Travelers lined up in a slow trickle. Serena waited until her row was summoned. No rush. No assertion of privilege. Just movement. As she walked down the jet bridge, a nearby screen flickered, part ad, part update feed. In the corner, the words AI Bias Accountability Act enters Senate review scrolled beneath a digital headline. Another screen looped a short animation. Transparency in travel. Know how your profile is used. They were still just words, but words now with weight. She entered the aircraft. The flight attendant smiled at her, not too wide, not too practiced. Good morning. Welcome aboard. No hesitation. No forced courtesy. Just human. Serena took her seat by the window. Not first class. Not priority. Just a seat. Just a view. Outside, the tarmac shimmered with morning light. Ground crew moved with a kind of silent choreography. Fueled trucks, baggage carts, reflective vests. Everything in motion. Everything interdependent. And yet, none of them knew that just weeks ago, a $680 million contract evaporated because someone in a clean uniform had looked at a quiet black woman and decided she didn't look like power. That was the danger. And the gift. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it sits calmly, reads the room, and chooses the exact second it needs to speak. Serena opened her tablet, not to work, but to read. She had spent the last weeks archiving documents, preparing testimony, organizing chains of digital custody, doing what needed to be done. But now, in this moment, she chose stillness. Stillness was hers again. The plane began to taxi. Serena didn't look at the other passengers. She didn't check the overhead announcements. Her hands remained steady in her lap, because something rare had happened. A system had failed to recognize her, and in doing so had revealed itself. And that revelation had triggered the one thing no machine can override: consequence. From government halls to private boardrooms, the chain reaction continued. Audits, cancellations, lawsuits, resignations, and in the background of every headline, every closed-door meeting, every software rollback, her name lived. Not as a symbol, not as a controversy, but as a calibration. A reminder of what happens when a system built to protect begins to forget who it was supposed to include. Outside the window, the plane accelerated. The runway blurred into momentum. Serena exhaled slowly. She was not a cautionary tale. She was a verdict. And the sky this time did not question if she belonged. It simply opened.